my generation very much grew up with a consistent narrative surrounding mass shootings. So it had become a little bit of a machine.
Hello, and thank you for joining this edition of One Young World Together Apart series. It's my pleasure to be interviewing Cameron Kasky, an American activist and advocate against gun violence, who co-founded the student-led gun control advocacy group, Never Again, MSD. He's also the co-founder of March for Our Lives, the nationwide student protest who took the world by storm in 2018. Cameron began pursuing this mission after surviving the February 2018 mass shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School. Thank you for joining us, Cameron. So Cameron, March for Our Lives is one of the most striking example of activism of our time. What made you decide to rally and take control of the narrative in that way?
Well, I would say, I was born in 2000, which is something that frustrates a lot of my older friends. And
Right.
having grown up in 2000, right around the time of Columbine, right around the time where, when I was starting to become a younger teenager, the Sandy Hook shooting happened, the Aurora shooting happened. And my generation very much grew up with a consistent narrative surrounding mass shootings. So it had become a little bit of a machine, and we had recognized the moving pieces that come with a mass shooting, and
Right.
it became a pattern. And what my friends and I said was, we have to break this pattern or it's going to continue. And we were a very, very specific case, and we were very different than other mass shootings. The Sandy Hook shooting, those were babies, and those were people, those
Right.
were the lives that were lost, were children who were not going out and espousing their sharp political views. And the Aurora shooting, the Columbine shooting, these were all things that were treated like anomalies. So when the shooting at my high school happened, I feel as though it was one of the first shootings in the country that felt like it was part of the new normal, and it was one of the first shootings in the country that settled with as
Right.
just part of what happened. And that was what I was thinking while we were locked in the school. I said, oh, are we one of these now? Are we the new Sandy Hook? Are we the new flavor of the month school shooting that people
Right.
are going to get all pumped about? Celebrities will make videos apologizing to us, and then it's game over.
Right.
We couldn't have that. We couldn't have that again, because if we had that again, it would keep on happening the same way. Everybody would find some kids to come on TV and talk about how depressed we are, and then it would be game over, and some other kids will get shot, and the
Right.
country will move on to that. So what we said was, while all these cameras are facing us, let's go in front of them and tell them, what keeps on appearing at these mass shootings, because it
Right.
seems as though people try to find all these similarities between the shooters. And it's important to study these violent people and figure out what signs we can trace to stop the next mass shooters, how we can improve the services we offer young people, the mental health services, the services for students to report violent behavior, although that happened at my high school and my high school swept it under the rug. We said that it's interesting that people aren't looking at all these mass shootings that involve an AR-15 and saying, wait a second, it's interesting that all of these have the same weapon. So we went out on
Right.
TV and we said, funny enough, when people want to talk about solutions, we got one for you. Let's talk about the weapon that keeps on binding these together. And that's not to say that every mass shooting in the country involves an AR-15. And
Right.
so we got out there and we said, let's flip the narrative on its head. Let's change the game. And as we did, all this massive pouring of support came out on social media, as we expected. We were all getting tons and tons of followers, tons and tons of people who were messaging us. And we said, online support is superficial. Online activism
Right.
is only as much as you can make it. So we need to bring all these people to Washington, D.C., right to the backyard of these politicians that we feel as though have been failing us. And we have to
Right.
show them a physical representation of how many people in this country are demanding this change. And the fact that all
Right.
those folks showed up was crazy for us, because it was during a nor'easter. It was during a horrible winter storm that was going all the way up the east coast of the United States. Our flights to DC got canceled. We ended up taking this abysmal
Wow.
7-hour train ride in which I listened to the Dear Evan Hansen soundtrack 3 times a row and didn't even realize it. Um, and we got to DC and we said, there is no earthly chance more than 50,000 people show up. And then more
Right.
than 50,000 people showed up, which was great. And in a lot of ways, we've made such wonderful changes. The activists all around the country and all the local chapters have advocated for such great laws. But at the end of the day, every local gun law in the country is only going to be as strong as the national laws. You look at the gun violence in
Right.
Chicago, and people say,
Right.
oh, well, Illinois has these very liberal, tight gun laws, and all these people in Chicago are killing each other. Well, then you realize how many of these guns recovered at crime scenes come from people driving over to the state next door, buying handguns in bulk and selling them for double on the streets. So
Right.
we need national change. We didn't get the national change we need, and that's something everybody's working on. But changes have been made, and it's important to count victories for what they are.
Absolutely. I mean, it is horrifying to imagine the situation you guys found yourself in 2018, and to survive the mass shooting itself. It's a huge deal. And given that the right to bear arms is really enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, it is really critical for young people to stand up and advocate against gun violence in the United States. Um, March for Our Lives implemented many strategies, from boycotting NRA supporting businesses to participating in town halls. Looking back, what were the successes and mistakes you made that other activists can learn from?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest things I would try to avoid as an activist is letting it overcome your life, because to a
Right.
certain extent, if you end up basing your personal value off of how far and effective your activism can go, you're never going to be happy. And mind you, activism is not about being happy. It's not about increasing the quality of your life. But to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent, if you're letting it make you miserable, you're not going to get the job done. And if you let yourself suffer at the hands of what you need to advocate for, activism should be you putting yourself out there, putting things on the line, and
Right.
taking stances that aren't always the most easy, being daring. But to a certain extent, you can't allow yourself to fall by the wayside just because you care about something too much. And a lot of my friends and I were
Right.
grieving from a mass shooting, and we're thinking about the friends we had lost, and going on TV every day, going to town halls every day. That builds up. And I can't even imagine the activists who aren't, white male teenagers like myself, who can feel safe in certain
Right.
situations where other people will be attacked. It's activism is a dangerous game for your mental health. And for many people, I'm lucky enough to say that this isn't as much a problem for me, but for many people, it puts you in physical danger. And I've
Right.
been harassed, tormented, threatened. People have cornered me in different places, but I'm not afraid of the police. I'm not
Right.
afraid of all these different white supremacists coming after me. They have, but
Right.
it's not something where I'm as at risk as so many other people and so many brilliant organizers. Most of the great organizers in our country are the ones you don't see talking on TV, espousing their views. Listen to how much I've run my mouth in this conversation. The greatest organizers in the country are very often the folks you never hear about, and it's very often on purpose. So
Right.
the crazy thing about us, and something that kind of separates March for Our Lives from other activist movements in many ways, is the whole country was looking at us as we were coming together. Whereas many other
Right.
movements and many other, corners of activism, it's about trying to get the attention. It's about trying to make a splash. We made a
Right.
splash. And after everybody was looking at us, we had to get our respective business together.
Right.
Business being a business, not that we were a business. It's my replacement for a curse word I was going to use. But I think that activism is about community. It's about building other people up. Activism has become such a clout game recently, and I think that um, 2018 and March for Our Lives and everything indirectly led to that, because all these different young people around the country wanted their voices to be heard, and it makes sense. But it becomes this. It can so quickly become as toxic as business or Hollywood once people start making it about themselves. And very often the
Mm-hmm.
people who make it about themselves are folks who look just like me. So it's
Hmm.
something to avoid. If you're doing activism for anything other than what you truly believe in, if you're doing it to rise up in some sort of social circle, because I mean,
Hmm.
activism is a great way to socially climb these days, and people exploit that to such a ridiculous degree. In many ways, I wish I could look back at many of the things I've said and done and rewrite the story to be less about me. Everything's about
Hmm.
me in my head, and that's something I have to think about consciously every single day and override. And
Hmm.
there's so many activists out there who have turned it into a business. Activism in
Right.
America has become Hollywood. It's showmanship. And I'm a theater kid,
Right.
so I'm going to be a showman. And that's why I think so much of our early messaging was effective. It was a story. It was grand, and it is a story. Storytelling is a
Right.
massive part of activism, but it has to be about more than just the story. It has to be about what happens next. It has to be about the sequel and the remake. That wasn't
Right.
funny. But
Well, it is important you tap into that. Like you said, activism has become kind of a showman business in a sense, more like an institution. But it's important not to lose that sense of narrative and the importance of your story, and not let yourself be the only single individual in that story, and not basically let
exactly.
it be about yourself. That is quite an interesting point, and I would definitely encourage our viewers to take that point down. Um, Along those lines, what is your advice to young people or people who want to stand up, against injustice, whether it be in the law, government, or businesses?
I would say that another thing to avoid would be vitriol. I have let anger fuel activism so much for me, and it's hard not to. It's hard to watch friends of yours walk out of school with blood on their shoes and not be pretty angry. I can't even imagine how infuriating seeing these things can be for so many young people in this country who simply want to put peace and love into the world. But the problem is anger clouds your judgment, and it's an important thing to fire yourself up. I'm angry about a lot of things. I'm I look at I don't advocate for anybody to look at my Twitter, but if you want to look at what an angry person looks like, look at both my tweets and the comments on my tweets. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're advocating against injustice in institutions, businesses, you have to realize that if you could be as pragmatic and calculated as possible, I feel as though that's going to be effective. And then get everybody else ticked off. Get folks angry. That's a huge way to get change. But if you are an
Right.
organizer, what you need to focus on is being as effective, peaceful, disruptive, but peaceful as possible.
In the wake of COVID-19, it has become difficult or impossible for people to congregate, and protest in traditional way. How can people continue to organize and push for public policies or policy change during this time?
Organizing is not always about what you can do physically. It's about messages. It's about how you
Right.
can communicate with other people. And as difficult as it can be, we're all on this Zoom call right now. We're all
Right.
talking. We're exchanging ideas to and you have to adapt. Activism is about taking the circumstances you're in and using them to best affect change. And again, it's so hard, and I encourage all young activists right now to spend more time checking in on themselves than
Right.
trying to be disruptive. As much as I love disruption, I'm a big disruption guy. I was advocating for Bernie Sanders. That's disruption characterized. and
Right.
and that's it's this is such a challenging time. People call it the new normal. I call it the temporary abnormal. I don't think this is the new
Hmm.
normal. It's propelling
Right.
us into the future, and it's going
Hmm.
to change everything forever. But it's like you can't try and to a certain extent, if you try and change the world every single day a different way, not all of them are going to hit. So I strongly recommend everybody just use this time to build community, use this time to reach
Right.
out to people, use this time to
Right.
learn about somebody that isn't you, because every time you learn about somebody that isn't you, I get to meet
Right.
people who have worked a lot harder than I have, and who have learned a lot more, who have suffered a lot more than I have. People call me a victim of a school shooting. I was
Right.
I was 300 yards away from everything that was happening. I didn't know where the shooter was. We thought he was going to barge into our door any second, but in retrospect, I could have safely mixed a margarita with a blender in the room I was in and been fine. So I consider myself more of a mass shooting attendee. And the only thing I'm a victim of is myself. And I am a victim of myself. I'm full of it.
Right.
I am somebody who's struggled with mental health immensely. I'm somebody who's almost lost a lot of things at my own hands, and somebody who's been to the bottom of the barrel. I've my rock bottom is so much lower, deeper, colder, and sadder than I wish it could be. But
Right.
I think that right now everybody's focus should be keeping themselves together and learning and becoming the best person you can be, and becoming the most conscious and thinking person you could be, so then when it's time to go out and organize, we feel a lot better and we're a lot more prepared.
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree. Spending this time to understand yourself, but also understand the world outside in which you're living, and trying to, be in that world in terms of, reading, deepening your understanding of your thoughts, your intellectual engagement, at the same time, trying to understand the other side, and how you can pull people from different spectrum in terms of bringing about change. And on that note, fighting for a cause can sometimes have the effect of creating tunnel vision and a lack of understanding for the other side. In your view, what can be stopped to stop this trend of polarization across the world, more so across the United States, when people from different sides of the political spectrum tend to hold steadfast to their respective beliefs and not willing to find a common ground to bring about change?
Well, I think first of all that some of the largest issues our country and the world faces, not just the United States, the world holistically, some of them are are things that people can approach from all angles. Now, mind you, income inequality, racial issues, the fact that China is literally running a concentration camp with over 1 million Muslim people right now, those are different things where people will get polarized. Those are things where people will be mad at each other. But things like
Right.
tech security, things like the fact that all of our data is being stolen, sold, and exploited, the
Right.
fact that the facial recognition technology is about to be a thing. Are you kidding me? These are horrible issues our world faces that I feel as though
Right.
people need to unite behind. I have looked at the Republican platform 100 times. I've looked at the Democratic platform 100 times. Nobody should support TikTok. And that sounds like a
Right.
funny thing, but it's horrible. It's a horrible thing that does bad things to good people and exploits children. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm out here talking about a TikTok's this evil thing, but I mean Amazon, conservatives who claim as though they don't like big government don't seem to realize that Amazon is a bigger government than pretty much anyone our world has. One thing a lot of people could do, you got to be polarized in a sense when you've got a president who's apologizing for white supremacy, and you've got Joe Biden out here telling people that they ain't black if they're not voting for
Mm-hmm.
him. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Imagine all the young people out there. Imagine all the young people of color who are picking between somebody who regularly praises white supremacists and somebody who tells you that if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. I
Right.
well, welcome to America, folks. This is what we've got. We've got Trump versus Biden. Mazel tov. Look at all these lessons we learned from 2016. It's hard not to be
Right.
polarized, and it's
Right.
hard not to be mad, and it's hard not to be apathetic, because how do you empathize with a system that only exists to hate poor people and hate people of color and gerrymander voices away? It's
Uh-huh.
you have to be polarized, you have to be as disruptive as possible, but I think that there needs to be a united front on, especially on different especially with tech security and data security. And that seems like a cop-out answer because I'm just picking one issue on which conservatives and liberals can unite. But, we're, I mean, Bezos is probably listening to this call right now.
It is definitely a difficult choice, for us living in America, for Americans right now, between Trump and Biden. And but looking at across the world, we're increasingly becoming polarized. So it is very important to, have your head up there and look at the big issues. And basically, yeah, being polarized matters. At the same time, finding that common ground, as you mentioned, that united front, to bridge the gap and come together, it's really critical. So before we wrap up, Cameron, what is your final action would you leave, for our One Young World community? What final action would you leave for One Young World community?
As somebody who's suffered so much in my life at my own hands, really at my hands, I've been trolled by the alt-right, I've been threatened, I've been sent the most offensive things and the most harmful mail. People found my address, people swatted my houses, people have taken such action against me, and yet my greatest enemy has always been myself. I would say you have to focus on your mental health, because I don't know if I'd be here today if it weren't for the people around me, and if it weren't for the support system I've had some horrible thoughts. I've come close to doing some horrible things to myself. And if I didn't have the family that I did, that sees me, respects me, and loves me so much, if I didn't have the community and the friends that I do, there's so many people in my life that I love, and so many people that I'm lucky enough to have love me back. And not everybody has that. And if I didn't, I would have lost to myself. So as horrible as everything is right now, as much as we've got a violent president, and as much as we have violent people in this country whose platforms are being elevated and accepted as damn near the mainstream, you got to focus on your mental health first and foremost.
Yeah.
It's not selfish to take care of yourself, and it's not selfish to look at this quarantine as an opportunity to grow, because it's horrible to I've been trying to focus on so many things. I've been trying to learn how to draw and animate and learn all these new programs, and I thought to myself, quarantine has been an opportunity for me to find personal growth in things and different things that engage me and make me feel creative. And then I feel so guilty for seeing this as an opportunity for personal growth when all these people are suffering. The fact of the matter is, any chance you can get to become a version of yourself that you think will be happier, healthier, and put more positivity into the world, you can't, you have to do what you can do. And I was working with a nonprofit called Humanity Forward, which America's sweetheart Andrew Yang started. I was sending around some of my personal money to people. I'd say you gotta try and be a version of you that you think will put the most happiness and love into the world.
Let's please give a big and huge thank you to Cameron Kasky for joining us today.
Thank you. Are
for
you
his
kidding
time
me?
and insight. It's really a pleasure to have you here, Cameron. And make sure to like, comment, and share this episode. And Cameron, continue your great endeavor, your great work, and basically see you on the road when
Thank you
this
so
whole
much,
saga
man.
is over.